much too bright. There. Okay. In honor of it being so cold lately, and it's only like the middle of October, and in honor of it being about a year since I went on this road trip, I'm gonna tell you guys a story about it getting very, very cold. So this is a story about a backpacking trip that in reality was pretty dangerous. I just didn't really realize it at that moment. So this exact time last year, I was in the Gila National Forest in New Mexico. I was going on a 4-day backpacking trip in the Gila National Forest along with some camping around that same area in the National Forest. I drove a whole 25 hours from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to the Gila National Forest for this trip. So I was planning on starting backpacking at like 10 a.m. Not like a super early time, but enough to get a good day's worth of backpacking in on that first day. Before I set out, I went to go make some coffee with my backpacking stove. As soon as I screwed on the fuel to it, fuel just started spurting out the top of my stove. It was broken. It wasn't working. There was no regulation of the fuel. It was just completely flowing out the top, nothing to stop it. My backpacking stove was broken, and I was supposed to head out backpacking in like 2 hours. But this isn't the main point of the story. This is just a little side story. So long story short, I had to drive a total of like 5.5 hours to buy a new backpacking stove, which I did. And then I finally started backpacking. I got out on the trail at like 4:30 p.m. when it was supposed to be at like 10 a.m. So as you can imagine, I didn't get out nearly as far as I wanted to, but I was out backpacking and all was well. All right, and just like that, only about 6 hours late, I'm finally on the trail. Got everything figured out. The stove works. Doing a big loop in the Gila National Forest. It's like a 37-mile round trip. And today I'm just gonna kind of get as far as I can before it gets dark because I have about an hour. So only after a few hours of backpacking, I found a camping site and it was like 7 p.m. and starting to get dark. Remember, this is in the desert canyon lands. In the canyons, it gets dark very, very fast. I have a feeling it's gonna get dark pretty quick. But I found a good place to camp. I set up my tent, made some food, and went to bed. Oh, I made it to this, what you would call a campsite, right as it was getting dark. And so now I'm just gonna hunker down and go to bed. It's supposed to be in the mid-30s tonight. I'm a little bundled up because it might get kind of cold. But hopefully just gonna sleep good and then hit it hard in the morning. Now, before going on this trip, I had been checking the weather ahead of time, as you do when you're gonna go out in nature. From what I remember seeing, the temperature was supposed to get down to about 40 degrees for the whole duration of backpacking and camping. So I figured, okay, I'll just bring my 40-degree sleeping bag rather than my 5-degree and just really bundle up at night to stay warm. No problem. So here is some information about sleeping bags. Sleeping bags are rated to their limit, not to what they are comfortable in. A 40-degree sleeping bag means that 40 degrees is the absolute limit that you should use it in, and it's going to be a very cold, uncomfortable night. The comfortable temperature for a 40-degree sleeping bag is more like 50 to 60 degrees. That's the temperature that you should really be using that sleeping bag in. So packed with me, I have my 40-degree sleeping bag, hiking pants, hiking socks, long wool socks, compression shorts, running tights, t-shirt, long sleeve, puff jacket, a hat, and my rain jacket. That is all of the clothes, everything that I have to stay warm. Plus my sleeping pad, which is just a cheap like $35 sleeping pad. Not even sure what the R rating is for that. So anyway, back to camping, back to backpacking. I had gotten in my tent for the night, I read for a little while, and I went to sleep. Another thing about the canyon lands and the desert, not only does it get dark very quickly when the sun sets, but it also gets very cold extremely quickly. As soon as the sun sets, the temperature drops rapidly. So I don't remember exactly what time it was, but I woke up very cold. So I didn't have all of my clothes on, and I put on whatever else I thought would keep me warm, and that was my puff jacket and some wool socks. I put those on and still wasn't warm enough to sleep, so I grabbed my rain jacket and threw that on top of me as well. That was just enough to get the chill out of my bones, and I was able to get a very on and off night of sleep. It got pretty cold last night. Not unbearably cold, but to the point where I definitely was awake for quite a bit of it. I'm glad I have all this other stuff to bundle up with. I basically had to stay curled up in a little ball to keep all my body heat in and stay warm throughout the night. If I ever moved out of that little ball, I would wake up because I would be too cold. Eventually, the sun rose, light started to peek through the canyon walls, and the temperature started to rise. So I always carry my Garmin InReach Mini. That sounds like an ad. I always carry my Garmin InReach Mini with me because, you know, you're backpacking, it's an emergency device, you should definitely have those things. And one feature on that is that you can check the local weather. I checked to see what the weather was, and it had gotten down to a brisk 30 degrees. It was 10 degrees colder than it was supposed to be. Remember, it was supposed to be 40 degrees. This first night, it had already gotten down to 30 degrees. No wonder I was so cold that night. But what really sucked was that it was only going to get colder over the next 2 days. And it's really cold right now. My hands are freezing. The upcoming night was going to get down to 28 degrees, which I was really not looking forward to, but I wasn't about to stop. I drove 25 hours to get to the Gila National Forest for this 4-day backpacking trip. A little cold wasn't gonna stop me. It crossed my mind to leave my pack on the ground and literally run back to my car because I was only like 5 or 6 miles from the trailhead. But if I did that, that would have been adding on an additional 10 to 12 miles on an already, I think, 12-mile day. So I decided not to do that and press on. So this second day of backpacking was all river crossings, and I mean a lot of river crossings. I think that's like number 6, 20 times. One thing that I've heard about the Gila National Forest is that you cross the river many, many times. If you have ever looked up backpacking in the Gila National Forest, I'm sure you have heard about how many times you cross the Gila River. I'm talking, I think I crossed the river 50 times. I stopped counting after like 23, but it was great. I found a hot spring. I was in the middle of some amazing canyons, places I had never been to, and I also found an amazing camping site for that night. This is a backpacker's dream. I was absolutely loving it. It was fantastic, but the sun was going to set and I was going to have to get some sleep at some point. Since I knew it was going to get even colder this night, I decided to put on all of the clothes I had right away rather than risk waking up in the middle of the night and having to put those on again. I also put my tent close to a campfire, a little bit closer, so that would hopefully keep me a little bit warmer for longer. I still woke up in the middle of that night with that deep chill in my bones from it getting so cold, but I do remember sleeping better this second night, and I think that was because I started with all of my clothes on and closer to a campfire rather than waking up in the middle of the night having to put those all on. And I knew if I stayed curled in that ball, I would stay warmer. So this second night actually went better than the first. It was still on and off with sleep, but the next morning arrived and the wonderful all-saving grace of the sun rose and things warmed up again. In the desert, it gets warmer just as fast when the sun rises as it gets cold when the sun sets, if that makes any sense. Things heat up very quickly and cool down very fast. So this is a big day. This was day 3. It was supposed to be my longest day and also the most vertical feet. 1,000 feet in the course of a mile. It's a long way up in a short distance. Basically straight up immediately. From the top, it was relatively flat pretty much the whole rest of the day as I was on top of the canyon walls and not down deep inside the canyons. This might have actually been my favorite day because you could look out and see forever. It was absolutely beautiful. Fall in the Gila National Forest is awesome. It's crazy how far we've come. I'm only halfway through. I want to stay here forever. I wish I could. I'm not even sure how many miles it was that day. I think it was somewhere between like 12 to 14, but I found a campsite next to a small reservoir of water that did not smell good, but it was water and I have a filter. So once again, I set up my campsite and had some dinner. I don't think I want to make a fire tonight. A little bit too dry. Not a good idea to make a fire here. Plus it's kind of windy, so. So I checked the weather again on my InReach Mini and the temperature was supposed to get down to 26 degrees. Even colder than the last 2 nights, which I was really not looking forward to. So I don't know if you guys have felt a real to your core kind of cold, but it's not fun. And I'm not talking about you're outside in the winter sledding, you have your snow pants on and your snow jacket, and the kind of cold you get sitting outside, but you still have some hot chocolate waiting inside the house for you where you can go and warm up anytime. I'm not talking that kind of cold. I'm talking there is nothing you can do to warm up. You have all of your clothes on, you're wearing everything possible. You have nothing else to warm you up and nowhere else to go that's going to get you warmer. You are stuck in the cold, and the only thing you can do is wait for the sun to rise. I think I got maybe 3 hours of sleep on this 3rd night of backpacking, and 2 of them were right when I went to bed before it got really, really cold. I woke up colder than I have ever been in my entire life. So I knew that it was supposed to get coldest around 4 a.m. and I was hoping that I woke up near 4 a.m. so I would only need to wait a couple hours until the sun rose. But I looked at my watch and it was only 1 in the morning. It was going to get even colder over the next 3 to 4 hours. So there I laid, trying to sleep, curled in a ball with my knees to my chest, my arms wrapped around to stay warm. Staying curled up in that ball was the only thing that would keep my inside warm, but my back and my legs were freezing because they were on the outside of my body. If I ever stretched out an arm or stretched out a leg even further, they would instantly be cold and my whole body would be freezing because it wasn't containing all my body heat. The only thing that kept me warm was staying tucked in that ball, and still it wasn't warm enough to sleep. I slept sort of on and off, but it was kind of more of like a drifting off and then waking up again, and that was every like 30 to 45 minutes. So I never really got any good sleep. It got so bad to the point that I highly considered getting out of my tent, packing all of my stuff up, and walking through the woods in the middle of the night with the light of my headlamp on the trail just to stay warm. Because I knew if I moved, I would stay warmer than just trying to stay warm inside my tent. I decided not to do that because I've never been here before. I didn't want to get lost in the middle of the night now. So I decided to stay in my tent and try to stay warm. Eventually, hardly sleeping, I saw the sun finally peek out and things started to heat up. As the daylight came in, I saw that my water bottle was completely frozen solid. There was ice crystals all over my tent, inside and out, and there was frost all over the ground. Last night it got super cold. This is my water from last night. It froze. When I woke up this morning, maybe like an hour ago, I went to go pick up my water bottle to get a drink from it, and it was 100% frozen. I again checked my inReach to see how cold it got, and it had gotten down to 22 degrees Fahrenheit. 10 degrees below freezing and almost 20 degrees below what my sleeping bag is rated to. Remember, I was in my 40-degree sleeping bag and it got down to 22 degrees. So my original plan was to go for 5 days or so, but I couldn't take one more sleepless night of shivering through the night, so I decided I would just make a longer day and go the remaining like 12 miles left of the trail and get back to my car and be done with backpacking because I couldn't take the cold anymore at night. I got back safely and slept great in my car. I had a full blanket on top of me and was nice and toasty. So while I still made it out, I was okay. The moral of the story is don't underestimate how cold it can get. I still am just like blown away about how cold it got. I think about it every so often about how cold it really got and how serious the situation could have been. Like, I'm pretty lucky to have made it out of that. And it was totally because I was underprepared and kind of took for granted the weather, the temperature, and my own abilities. So the moral of the story is don't underestimate the cold and be prepared for it to get even colder than what it's supposed to be. I'm not joking in that I could have froze to death. 22 degrees is very cold, and I didn't have the proper gear for the occasion. I'm lucky enough to have brought in my rain jacket because putting that on, being waterproof, really kept my body heat in and kind of was that windproof barrier that kept a lot of my heat in. If I didn't have that, I think the story would be a lot different and I would have been even more miserable on that trip. So when you're prepping for a trip, make sure you check the weather and bring the right gear for the elements. Don't make the mistake I did and push the boundaries of your equipment, especially your sleeping bag, because the cold is not going to let up, and I'm speaking from experience. I still had a fantastic time on that trip. I will forever regard that as one of my favorite road trips because I saw some amazing places I had never been to, and it was my first big solo road trip. But had I brought the right gear for backpacking, like my 5-degree sleeping bag, I probably would have gotten a lot better sleep and enjoyed the nights a lot more. So thank you guys for watching this video, and please, if you plan on doing some winter backpacking or even some fall backpacking, please be safe and prepare correctly for the elements. Thank you guys for watching this video. Please leave me a like if you enjoyed this, subscribe to my channel if you want to, and I will see you guys in my next video. Peace out!